Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's Lisa Norell, and it is Friday, March 5th. I should say it is chilly Friday, March 5th here in Virginia in the United States. Welcome to the Mindful Marketer live stream. We are actually coming up on our 1-year anniversary, if you can believe that. So I'm really glad you're here. And for those of you that might need to leave a little bit earlier, later on, Stefan, I am joined by Stefan, my producer. He'll make sure that he puts the link up where we save all of our replays. And now we've got over 30 great programs available to you at no charge through the wonders of LinkedIn Live. So thanks for being here. Tesla, HubSpot, Pepsi, Airbnb, what on earth do they all have in common? Well, they are bold. They market differently and they go after segments where there is a gorilla. So how do you fuel an innovative marketing culture when you're not lucky enough necessarily to be number one in your B2B segment? And that's why I'm really excited today to be sitting down with Monique Elliott, a friend and the Senior Vice President of Global Marketing at Schneider Industrial Automation Solutions. She has some inside secrets that she's going to be sharing with us and bringing years of experience with B2B titans such as GE, ABB, and others. She really is one of my pioneer marketing leader friends, and I'm just so excited that I was able to speak with her today for a bit. She's going to be with us today until 10 minutes after 2. So grab your hot tea and get ready to send us your best questions, and we'll see them in the chat. So without further ado, let's welcome Monique. How are you doing this afternoon, Monique?
I'm doing well, Lisa. Thank you for having me today. I'm really looking forward to our discussion.
Me too. And by the way, we have Bill joining us from Portland, Oregon. So welcome, Bill, another marketing person who loves to learn about strategy. So Monique, tell me, give us your origin story. When did you, as a young person, realize that marketing and marketing strategy was a path you wanted to pursue?
So, Lisa, I wish I could say it was when I was a very young person. I always had the ambition to be a marketer or to go into business. But the truth is that I began my interest in marketing in college, and rather late in college. So I had gone to school with the ambitions to go into education. And I was taking a marketing class to fulfill a minor in business. And it was an evening class, and it was a very long class. It was 4 hours once a week. I went in with an open mind, and I walked out saying, I think I'm going to switch careers or switch paths and leave education and go into business and into international business with an emphasis in marketing. And so it was really that experience that I had that opened my eyes to, I would say, the benefit of marketing, but also just the, I would say, very curious nature that I have, and that marketing allows you to explore and be curious and to help customers solve problems. So that's when it first happened. It was very late in my college career when I decided marketing was the path I wanted to take.
And like me, you started as a child.
Yes, exactly. Of course.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Well, it's interesting because you are an educator. You were one of the early CMOs I met when we were launching our marketing private peer communities for CMOs. And you have a natural gravitation towards educating and inspiring not only your teams, but inspiring other professionals. You spend a lot more time than many of the CMOs I work with really sharing the lessons you learn about things that are still somewhat cutting edge in our field, like customer experience and digital transformation and other very sticky topics.
Lisa, I think, part of it probably stems from that early desire to go into education and mentoring and coaching. I think there's also something very rewarding being in the B2B space and taking lessons that we're learning from colleagues and peers in the consumer world and applying them into B2B. Because to your point, they might be cutting edge for us in this space, but for the friends on the consumer side, they're probably not as edgy. And I really enjoy the translation of seeing how buying behaviors shift and change in the consumer world and applying that into B2B. And I do have a lot of colleagues and friends who say, gosh, it must be really hard to do marketing in a space where the products aren't necessarily as recognizable in our day-to-day lives. And I say, certainly it is. And I think that's what propels me to try to share best practices and help others, because I think it is harder. I also think it's more rewarding because there's more runway to show value and to really have an impact.
Yes, and talk about impact. You are now working in an organization that has mega impact, tens of thousands of employees at Schneider Electric, a very large global organization with its roots in France. I think over 100 years young now.
Yep.
Tell us how, when you started at Schneider, and let's dive into the marketing topic. What did you notice right away about the industrial automation competitive position that you were facing, and some of your excitement or trepidation you were experiencing?
Sure. So, and in full disclosure, so I have not spent many years in industrial automation. In joining Schneider, this is my entry into the industrial automation space. I did spend many years with, as you mentioned, GE and ABB in other industries, financial services, and also time and energy, but not the industrial automation side. So it was a very interesting endeavor, and I would say incredibly exciting because the space is changing rapidly. And it's also a space where there's a lot of advancements in how we are approaching the automation world. If you think about making factories more sustainable, more efficient, there's a lot of development and a lot of innovation. So to answer your question, I approached it very much with a lot of excitement because it's a very, very exciting space to be in. From a marketing perspective, it is a bit of a different environment, which is kind of the nature of our conversation today, in that there are a lot of other big players in this space. And I spent many years with a company that was almost always the big player. And there are different strategies as a marketer that one needs to take when you are not in the lead position, right? When you're not the leading brand position. And we can talk a little bit about what it means to be some of those other brands, but I think it's fair to say that where I find myself now, it's not in the lead brand position in this particular space.
I want to pause for a second and also mention we have a bunch of people that are just joining us. One, we have David from Raleigh. We have Leslie from sunny Florida. We have, please, Leslie, send us some warm weather up here to Virginia. We're going to be taking your questions, so I trust you'll be posting a few of those soon. So it would be fun also, Monique, to find out from our live audience how many of you currently are also not number one in your particular field, because a lot of what you're going to share, Monique, I think will have universal benefit regardless of industry. So what did you do when you arrived there and noticed the market position of the solutions?
So, and what I'll say too is it's what we're doing. So it's what we started to do as a marketing organization and are continuing to do. And I love what you said, Lisa, because it's really agnostic of industry, right? Where some of these techniques and these tools can be helpful. But the first thing we did is we said, so what kind of brand do we want to be? Because you can say, all right, what we want to do is aim for that lead position, aim for that lead brand. But there's other options, right? So you can also aspire to be the disruptive brand, right? And when you mentioned a few, Lisa, Airbnb, Netflix, Uber, those are disruptive brands, right? And what they're doing and what they've done is they've looked outside of the current players into completely new spaces. So they've almost separated themselves from the competition and created brand new spaces, almost like a blue ocean strategy. Or there's another way you can go, which is really the challenger brand. And I very much like this approach when you're in mature markets where you have very, I would say, static kind of competition. And the name of the game here is really repositioning that leader. So you're repositioning the perspective or I would say the environment of the market, and you're challenging others. So you're not a challenger. This is a very important point. You're not a challenger. You're not disadvantaged. You're not a challenged brand. You are challenging others around you, and you are shifting the perception of the category that you're in. So it's a very different marketing strategy. So that was the first thing we did. We said, listen, I think, who are we? Who do we want to be? And we said, we really like this idea that we are challenging kind of the space that we're in.
Poking and provoking. So help us understand a challenging message that, for example, that you came up with or that you are currently testing out.
So I would say, first and foremost, in the space that I'm in, it's really about innovation, and it's about the way that industrial software is established and created in the market. So it certainly was not, this was not a marketing message. This was really leaning into the innovation and the proof points that are coming out of the organization around a concept called universal automation. And this is really an open automation system that allows much more interoperability between the different vendors in the automation space. And this is actually a very key point, is that if you are going to reposition yourself and you're going to try to step ahead of the others in your market, it's important that it's not a marketing message. It's important that there are proof points to how you really are challenging and shaping the market that you're in. And so this has been a very collaborative approach with our R&D teams, with our commercial organization, with the product development teams around how we are challenging the market and how we are looking at a different lens of automation.
That's fascinating. And I can imagine that you had to collaborate across many time zones.
Oh yes, from a global perspective, absolutely. So it's, as you mentioned, it's a global organization. And of course, most of us are home. So everything over the last year has been done remote. So there certainly is a lot of collaboration between different time zones in order to make this happen.
I bet. Now, in the work from home scenario, how have you shifted your way of collaborating to adapt and keep people engaged in some pretty big, heady topics? I mean, your solutions are probably in the tens of millions of dollars, a typical sale. So you've got a lot of people involved in helping to bring that to the finish line. That's a tough question, Lisa, right? Like, how are we kind of all keeping our employees engaged and our colleagues engaged during this time? I would say a lot of flexibility in schedules, meaning that, whereas before the hours were 9 to 5, 8 to 6, what have you, the hours are much more flexible to allow for people to take care of personal demands that they may have at home, or maybe they just prefer to work different hours because it's easier from your home, so you can kind of come in and out. So I think just allowing that flexibility. I often will flex my days, so starting very, very early in the morning, taking a break in the afternoon, and then maybe coming back on later or what have you. So I think that's the first thing. As silly kind of as it sounds, the use of the camera is really important. I feel like before COVID, you would always have conference calls and you'd be on WebEx or Skype or what have you, but turning on the camera was not the first choice. But now being able to see people, it's not the same, but it definitely helps. I think the other thing too, what we did outside of the logistics of just working remote, when we decided to go through this branding campaign, we had separate work streams around it that allowed people to work somewhat in their own work stream independently, and then we would come back together for steering committees or for team meetings. And so we had one work stream that was all focused on the customer VOC.
and one work stream on the creative aspect, and one on the competitive analysis. And so that also, I think, allowed people to have a little bit more flexibility and independence, so that when we all came together, we brought different parts of that puzzle to the table.
That's really cool. So you were running parallel work streams.
Yes. And I think
Yes.
that's, well, it's a good way to also ensure that the work isn't sequential, so you can go a little bit faster.
Yeah, and I am finding too that along with Zoom fatigue, some people are complaining of PowerPoint fatigue. And there is a new book that I am excited to dive into from the former chief of staff to Jeff Bezos at Amazon, talking about how they literally and organically eradicated PowerPoint from their team meetings and instead replaced it with 6-page narratives. Wow. So it's a fascinating concept. I'm putting that out there because I think that there are times when we collaborate across time zones or across cultures, as you do on a daily basis, where PowerPoint must be more of a hindrance than a helper.
It's, I feel like we've been having the PowerPoint conversation for a long time, right? I remember, like, it feels like years ago, but it's probably like 10 years ago. I remember there was an edict in one of the companies that I was with that there was no more PowerPoint, and I think it lasted for maybe 45 days. And then you just kind of can't help yourself. What I think, the way that I think about it is leverage the medium that works best for you. And so what do I mean by that? So when we work with our creative studio team on developing new marketing campaigns, generally what works best is that brief, right? That 6 to 10 page Word document brief where you're articulating the background of the market, right? What is it that you want this campaign to say? So the brief works really, really well. If I'm going to present a summary of where we are from a performance perspective for one of our campaigns, yeah, maybe 1 or 2 PowerPoint pages might work for that. So I think it's more around what medium works best to convey your message, and leverage that. And I would argue that that's the same thing with customers. So we're having this discussion internally, but it's the same thing with customers, right? Whether it's a bite-sized consumable piece of social media or it's the 10-page white paper on a new piece of technology, it depends on, right, what is the best format for you to get your message across.
Yes. And just for those of you watching, I'm trying to avoid going off on a tangent here because we have so many good ideas here to uncover. If anyone is interested, you can search for the book by Colin Breyer. And the book is called Working Backwards: Insights, Stories, and Secrets from Inside Amazon. And of course, talk about industrial automation or supply chain. Amazon certainly has a few feathers in their cap around optimizing in that area. But there are some interesting ideas in there that talk about getting people to collaborate and generate results quickly without getting too bogged down in the details of the meetings and the planning. So anyway, that's just a quick note or a quick tip that we often like to share here in our live streams. But let's talk a little bit more here about how you even, put some parameters, some beginning, middle, and end around an initiative of that magnitude. How are you keeping it such that you're constantly making progress and it doesn't end up becoming a boiling of the ocean marketing initiative?
Right. It's a good question. Although before I forget, I have to share a book actually as well, because you kind of went down that path. And so yeah, I do have a tip because it's actually a very useful resource if you're interested in learning more about challenger brands. And it's a book by Adam Morgan called How to Eat the Big Fish. And I really recommend it. And it's, if you're also interested to learn more, there's an organization out of the UK called the Challenger Project. And it's really fascinating. So I highly recommend it, just to kind of get you in the mindset, because The other thing I think is important to mention is being the leading brand, it's a position, it's a fact, it's a status, right? There's numbers around how, like if you're in the lead position, it's very clear. Being a challenger brand or even a disruptive brand is a mindset. Because you can be a challenger brand and you can still be very much in a lead position, or you could be by the end of the pack. So I think it's very important to realize that it's all about the mindset that you go in with when you are really tackling kind of these marketing challenges or marketing initiatives, as you say, Lisa.
Yes.
How do you keep it together, right? Or how do you keep it organized, I think was your question. You know what, we did it in phases, right? So the first phase was really a lot of homework around, you know, how are the competitors talking about our market? What's the language that we hear out there? How are the big influencers in the industry talking about the future and the industries of the future? How are they talking about the vision of automation? There was a study as well on some of our leading industry forums, right? So consortiums and forums. So we did a lot of homework to try to understand what the market was saying. And then from there, we went into this challenger study, as I mentioned. So that was kind of phase 2 of deciding what did we want to be known for as a brand. And then now we're really into phase 3, which is the amplification of our messaging into the market. So we kind of, and that takes some time. I think that's the other learning here, is that this isn't done in 2 to 3 weeks. This is more likely done in a year to a year and a half by the time you really, if you really want to do it right.
Yes, and especially when you're dealing with very costly enterprise level solutions that you might be trying to market. This is not, you know, you have to temper the impatience from the C-suite that, as we have talked about at the CMO's Leading Innovation Conference that I hosted pre-COVID, there is a general impatience in the C-suite, especially if you're a publicly traded company, of show me ROI. I want to see ROI. I want to see ROI. But you can't do that in 90 days with something of this level of import.
Right. Well, and I think, Lisa, it's a valid point. I think also I think there needs to be a recognition of different types of marketing strategies. So there's certainly what we all want to do around demand generation, right? And impact on sales and revenue. There's also, when you're looking to, when you're looking to shift the perception of the category or the market that you're in, there also needs to be a lot of market priming and market seeding. And that's a different type of marketing, right? When you are trying to educate or re-educate a market on the future, and in our case, on the industries of the future, you have to do a lot of market priming. And so that's not your typical demand generation type of marketing. That is symposiums, that's white papers, that's talking to customers. It's a different approach. It's a much more educational approach to marketing. So that's the other angle I think we have to recognize.
Yes, thank you. And what I'm hearing is that, and I know this from when you spoke to our CMOs at the conference, setting the proper expectations with the C-suite early and saying, look, there are different ways of generating value from marketing. This one ain't funnel development right now. This is not demand gen. So, let's make sure we have proper expectations. You know what I also think would be fun, and again, I'm borrowing this from Colin Breyer, is at some stage of that branding initiative, being able to challenge not the market, but challenge your team and say, I want you all to come back with a one-page story where, and I think Amazon calls it the working backwards press release. And they talk about, all right, I want you to write the press release describing how our customers' condition was improved dramatically as a result of this product or solution working well for them. So it forces them to actually develop quotes and perspectives of the customer and see where are the value points we're trying to make, we're promising we're going to deliver.
Right. It's funny, Lisa, when you're speaking to that reminds me a little bit of, I don't know if you did this when you were a kid, but writing that letter to yourself 20 years from now, like what is it that you want to be when you grow up? So it's a little bit of that, right? Like if you put it on paper, then it becomes reality, right? I like that. I like that very much. I think the other thing too is, and this can be kind of scary for marketers. And I had a mentor many years ago who kind of shared the expression with me. It's like making sausage. Like you really don't want to see sausage being made, right? But if you like sausage, it's great at the end, but you don't really want to watch the process. And I think sometimes when you're going through these transformative types of projects, you do have to show people the sausage being made. And you have to kind of walk them through that process. And that was one of the things that we did, is pulling my peers together and others in the organization through the process, and actually doing an exercise on what kind of brand do we want to be, and let's have a debate and let's have a vote on what it is that we want to be. And so I think sometimes as marketers, and maybe it's just human nature, we want to wait until the final product is there so we can say, oh, this is so great, look at what we accomplished. But sometimes you got to take people through the journey with you to ensure that there's that buy-in along the way, especially when it's really complicated.
I only stumble across the perfectionist mindset on days that end in Y.
Yeah.
And there, many of us have that perfectionist mindset that gets in the way. Now, the other thing I enjoy is I invite everyone to also do a Google search on Monique, because you have been speaking and writing often on the first step of this journey when you are building your new challenger brand strategy, which is it starts with changing your mindset and your language. Talk to us how you do that in a global organization where people are speaking many different languages.
Right. Language is important. And we've talked about this for a couple of years, right? About how important language is. I will harken back to an experience several years ago now, separate from this one, but I think it probably articulates the point a little bit better. And that was when I was leading an e-commerce team with one of my previous employers. And it was definitely a big collaborative team, cross-functional team. So it wasn't just myself, there was IT, there was product management, it was a huge team. And what we realized is that the leadership kept asking us kind of when we were going to be done with e-commerce. Like, when are you going to be done with that? And we were struggling with trying to articulate, well, you're never really done with it, right? Like, you have to start it. Like, I don't think it's ever going to be done. And so what we did is we took a page out of the book from our friends in IT, a great colleague of mine, who he said to us, he goes, why don't we start changing the language around this and start talking about this as a product? So it's not e-commerce as a project. And you can take e-commerce out and put whatever you want, right? XXX as a project, a brand study as a project, but start to talk about it as a product, because products don't have usually stops and starts. There's a life cycle to a product. There is a dedicated team to a product. You sunrise and sunset products. And it was just changing that little bit of language. And it was amazing the response that we got around, oh, okay, so you're developing a new product for our company, and therefore we're going to treat you in a very different way than had we continued with the project approach. So I share that because it's a learning that I take now into almost everything, and even with what we're doing today. Like, this is not a brand campaign that's a start and stop in the first or second quarter. This is an evolution of where we want to go and where we want to be. I hope it never stops, because we're going to get smarter and smarter.
And how, on a 1 to 10 scale, how rigorous did you have to be, with 10 being extremely rigorous, when you started in your first few months there at Schneider, to say we have to say no, or we have to get rid of a few products or projects that are simply not generating a return or helping us build this challenger brand?
It's a good question. I think there was a bit of benefit around being new to the organization and new to the team that it allowed me to really reevaluate the work that was going on and to kind of say start and stop. I think I also had the benefit, which is probably the only time I would say the benefit of COVID, in that we had to stop a lot of things because we had to pivot, and we had to think about how we were going to reposition our marketing, considering the circumstances and considering the environment. So there was a little bit of, I think I had a little bit of benefit there in the ability to do that. But it's still hard. It's still hard to say we're going to stop this because it's not generating what we want, because there's oftentimes emotions tied to those projects. But I will say that the company is very good at the autonomy to be able to say what is valuable and what isn't valuable and to make those decisions.
Yes. Well, that's an important point, because there are organizations I have stumbled across recently where they start with the best intentions, but they might have a senior executive who is highly regarded, and they get, I'll say, lazy, or they lose their courage. And then that one executive becomes the stopgap or the number one and only person who makes the go, no-go decisions. And I think that's an extremely risky position for a couple reasons. Number one, it does not show strategic versatility when that organization only has one decision-making model, number one, which is everything goes to that executive for final blessing. And the other thing that is worse, that ties into your competitive distinction or differentiation comments earlier, is the competitors know exactly what kind of moves you're going to make and who's making the moves, because they know who the boss is, right? So, you're too predictable. Too predictable.
I think company culture certainly matters. And every company is very unique in that. The guidance that I would share, kind of give, is stay true to kind of your true north and what you think is the right thing to do, and continue to push for what you believe in at the end of the day. And I think it's also good to make sure that you have people around you who are advocates as well, and that you can lean on and depend on. And for myself, being new to the space, for me, it's incredibly important to have my peers around me. They're my sounding boards. I go to them, and the people who work for me as well, who have been with the company longer than I have. They are tremendous counsel as we're going through this journey.
Yes, and building up those individuals and saying, look, you've got autonomy. I am going to entrust you to this. And sometimes, somebody's going to make a mistake, and nobody's shooting at them. So you'll learn and you'll pick up from there. I also want to mention to people that this is very top of mind right now, as all of us are working from home, to maintain that latitude and flexibility around how decisions get made. So I'm putting here in the comments, Monique, a blog post I published a couple of years ago to give everyone different ways of making decisions, depending upon the type of decision that is being made. So just go there for an example of 7 different ways you can make decisions so that you don't become that roadblock to marketing success. So give us some thoughts, Monique, as we wrap up. Give us some key lessons learned as I think you're approaching your full year now with Schneider.
Yes, I just hit it, actually. Yeah, just 1 year. Lessons learned. It's you can never do enough voice of the customer. Certainly, I think that's probably goes without saying. And of course, it was challenging last year because we couldn't get out and see customers. But we did try to connect with customers as much as possible as we were going down this branding journey. So do more of that. right? You can never do more. You can never do enough, I should say. And I think the second lesson was, although we cast a pretty wide net and on who we included in the study and kind of along with us through the big gate, the milestones, I would probably have included more of our country's organization. So going to your point about being a big global company. So for those of you who are in big global companies, including the perspectives of all of the different countries that you may do business in is really important, because what resonates in one may not resonate in another. Or maybe it's just nuance and it needs to be contextualized or localized. But I think getting more country input too at the beginning of this process is incredibly important. So both of them, Lisa, really have to do with inviting more people to the table, because I really do believe that is the best way to ensure success is ensuring that you have a lot of stakeholder buy-in.
I would trust too that also has to have some time constraints around it. Otherwise, it turns into this multi-year consensus building academic exercise.
Right. That's true. That's true. Now, asking for feedback and input doesn't necessarily mean asking for permission. So there's always different ways to think about it. But I certainly think that different perspectives make for a very, very valuable output.
That's great. So you're clearly getting through the first gate of what any successful marketing leader does is you're creating a safe environment for people to be straight and to trust one another, that they can say what's on their mind.
I hope so. Yes, yes. I mean, I think that also goes back to the culture of the company that one is in. And I am very fortunate to be in a culture that you absolutely can bring your different ideas to the table and share your perspectives. But I hope that we all create that environment for it.
Yes, I agree. It's really the gate to all other decision-making and marketing success. And I see trust through three prisms. One is doing what I say I'm going to do, showing up at my meeting on time, letting people know the status of where I'm at with my product or project. Second is really having the functional skills that I am expected to have. And if I don't have them, I go study and build those. And the third right now, especially during COVID, Monique, is having a sense of kindness and benevolence towards others. I mean, you can be a tyrant and still be effective in those other two areas, and people will never trust you. So I think the trust factor has to be part of everything we do, no matter where our brand stands in the industry or the marketplace.
I agree. I think there's been a lot of lessons learned around employee advocacy and also flexibility in work in different styles. And I think those are all things that I hope stay, right? I think it's been a good lesson for all of us, and it's also proved to work.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you today for giving us some of your own avatars, some of the authors and communities that you enjoy. In closing, who are your avatars, one or two, for 2021 in any aspect of your life?
In any aspect of my life. I could probably rattle off lots of different professional avatars and mentors, but I have to tell you that right now my family is my rock and my sounding board. And for 2021, I think it's going to be about taking all the learnings from last year and making them better for this year, right? So, I mean, I have great colleagues. I have great mentors at work. I have great mentors from previous companies as well. So that's a difficult one for me to answer, Lisa. But for 2021, I think it's going to be great once we can actually get out and reconnect with friends and families and colleagues in person. That's what I'm looking forward to this year.
I know, my gosh, I have so many hugs to catch up on. It's insane. It's insane. Yeah. So it's been really wonderful to spend time with you, and we can't wait to see the Schneider Electric industrial automation brand come to shine into the light. So let's make sure, for those of you watching, make sure you follow Monique on LinkedIn, as she will be sharing the stories along the way. Monique, I know it's probably a Friday. It's Friday afternoon up there in Connecticut. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you very much for having me, and good afternoon to everyone who was able to join.
Excellent. We'll have you back again, Monique.
Thank you.
CMO,
Take care.
Senior Vice President of Global Marketing from Schneider Industrial Automation, and thanks again. So, my friends, it's up to the bewitching hour. We're all finished for the day. As you know, we are here for first 3 Fridays of the month on LinkedIn Live, YouTube, and Facebook Live. So next week, I hope you'll return and join us. We look at the quality and caliber of leaders that we bring to you every first 3 Fridays. I'm very honored to have people like Monique. Next week, we're going to shift gears a little bit. We have 𝐂𝐿𝐴 joining us from New York City, and she has been voted and named the #1 startup coach in the country. 𝐂𝐿𝐴 is going to help us, all of us who are marketers, how we can think like an entrepreneur. What are those qualities and how can you live into that? So let's look forward to seeing all of you next Friday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And make sure you're following me and getting our newsletter every couple of weeks where we send out our schedule. So Stefan Kaplan, my trusty producer here, is going to put that link up on the screen for you so you don't miss a show. Bring your employees, bring your team members. I'd love to have you bring questions. So until March 12th, next week, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, lead well, live safely, and stay mindful.